Hi everyone. I think this is the only video I make every year which specifically isn't about books. But like I mentioned sometimes, I go to see a lot of films as well, and since this is the time of year when everyone is making their favorite things of the year lists, I thought I would do one about my favorite films that I've watched over the year as well. And aren't necessarily all new films that just came out this year, although most of them are fairly recent. Some of them might have only just been released in the UK this year, or I watched them on catch up on one service or another. But I'm going to have some time over the festive break to watch some films and catch up on some films. So I'd love to know about some of your favorite movies that you've seen this year. If you want to put them in the comments below of things I should catch up on if I don't mention them in this list. Also, I'm wearing one of my favorite new graphic t-shirts, which is Norma Jean Baker with her books. So I do have a nod to books in here somewhere. So to start off, I'm going to talk about a really recent film which only just came out, Marriage Story, Noah Baumbach's films. I love his movies. I just find them really emotional and immersive, and this with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson is just perfect. A look at the breakdown of a relationship, and it's portrayed in a really complex and tragic way. And there's some really like cringe scenes of just incredibly awkward scenes. And I think when a film does that, it's so poignant. And talking about poignancy, there are some incredible use of a couple of Stephen Sondheim songs in the film, which I wasn't expecting, and just pack a real emotional punch. So then there's a film called Moffie, which is about a South African young man who's conscripted to join the army to fight for apartheid. And this just sort of brings to home this sort of nightmare situation. I'm so glad I don't live in a time when I might be conscripted, because that would just be an absolute total nightmare for me. I mean, especially, can you imagine like fighting for a cause that you hate and that you don't approve of, and that you're forced to join an army in this way, and also because it's just this hyper masculine environment, and so it portrays that about a young man who's homosexual, and he never even specifically comes out, but it's just done in a very subtle and very moving way. And it's based on a novel which I think is based on the author's own autobiographical experiences having to go through this, and I think it's such a brilliant movie. Then there's a film called Monos, which is about a teenage guerrilla group of bandits who kidnap someone and hold them to hostage in the mountainous countryside, which is very similar to Bolivia or Colombia, and it just follows the lives of this group as they go through this very dramatic experience. It's sort of Lord of the Flies-esque sort of situation, because they're all basically teenagers, but they're doing these very adult things in wartime. It's a very tense film, but it also says some really interesting things about gender in the portrayal of its characters. Then there's a film called The Last Tree, which is about a British boy who's raised by a foster mother in the countryside, but then his birth mother decides she wants to take him back, and so she brings him to London, and it's about his uneasy adjustment to this urban environment, and he gets involved with crime and has a really difficult transition into adulthood. It's such a moving film. Next there is Ad Astra, and I mentioned sometimes that how I'm sort of an outer space geek. I love watching films about outer space documentaries, so it's fun to see a fictional film that's done in an intelligent and really moving way. And it's about Brad Pitt going on a mission out to Neptune, and how could I not like that? And it's been overdone sometimes, a lot of this sort of tortured man who's just looking for a hug from his bastard father. I mean, that's basically sort of what the film is about, but it's done in quite a good way. And also it has a really weird cameo from Natasha Lyonne, who plays a very small role in it. She just sort of pops up and is sort of wasted because she's such an amazing actress. But it was wonderful to see her pop up. And keeping on with the theme of outer space films, there's a film called High Life, which is much artier, even though the sort of structure of the film it sort of follows a lot of similar space tropes of people who go out on a mission and then it goes wrong, and there's a secret mission that some larger organization has for having them go on this space journey. But it's so twisted and perverse, this movie, with Juliette Binoche and Robert Pattinson. And basically, if you've ever fantasized about keeping RPATs as a sex slave in space, then this is the film for you. Now, if you told me at the start of 2019 that one of my favorite films would be a new Jennifer Lopez film, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But this new film, Hustlers, is really good, I think, as well as being a lot of fun and very glitzy and sort of trashy in an indulgent way. But also really good about a group of erotic dancers who turn the tables on a group of Wall Street businessmen and all the moral complications of that. And Constance Wu is really excellent in it, as well as the whole cast, really. And then there is the film Eighth Grade, which this movie just broke my heart. I mean, it took me back to that whole awkward adolescent experience of middle school. It captures it so well, really touchingly portrays a father and daughter relationship. And also, as a YouTube creator, it's about a girl who starts a YouTube channel and makes a lot of videos which barely anyone watches, and it's just that sort of nightmare scenario of an awkward person trying to put themselves out there and nobody responds. The Sisters Brothers, this is based on a novel by Patrick DeWitt, which I haven't read. I wish I had read, and the theme and the story, the subject matter of the story, isn't one I would naturally be drawn to. It's about a couple of assassin cowboys who go after a gold prospector, and I'm not that interested in sort of westerns or cowboy movies, but because of the cast, I think mainly because John C. Reilly and Joaquin Phoenix and Jake Gyllenhaal and Riz Ahmed, they're all really great actors, and the story is really excellent and tragic and horrible, how it all plays out, but really gripping for that reason. Wild Rose, this is such an excellent film about a woman from Glasgow who dreams of being a Nashville country singer, and it's a really sensitive portrayal of like single motherhood and the desire to still be creative and express yourself creatively while being a parent, and it's so well done. Then there's the film We the Animals, which is based on a novel by Justin Torres, which I absolutely loved the novel, and you know how there's a lot of that anxiety about our favorite books being made into films, but this is it's so well done, this film adaptation of this novel, which is basically sort of a coming of age story about a boy and his two brothers growing up in a very masculine household, and his sort of struggles to discover his own individual voice while being very closely connected with his brothers and finding a life distinct from his family. The Kindergarten Teacher, and this is another film that I'm so drawn to because the story and the way it plays out is so twisted and perverse. So Maggie Gyllenhaal's character becomes obsessed with a child who she believes is a child prodigy, and it's just about her increasing mania around this child. Then there is Varda by Agnes, and this is a documentary film all about the life of Agnes Varda, the great French filmmaker who sadly died earlier this year. And if you haven't seen Agnes Varda's films before, do yourself a favor and watch some of her. And she's done fictional films as well as a lot of documentaries towards the end of her life. She was doing a lot more documentaries, like the recent film Faces Places, which is absolutely brilliant. I loved it so much. I think I talked about it in past years as one of my favorite films of the year. But also her great classic movie Cleo from 5 till 7 is absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I just absolutely adored her. And so it was very sad that she passed on. But this is a wonderful sort of overview of her career and her inspiration as a filmmaker. Then there's a couple more documentaries. There's The Kingmaker about the life of Imelda Marcos, the First Lady of the Philippines, and her very controversial political career, and it's such an amazing portrayal. I mean, it's made by Lauren Greenfield, who it really specializes in sort of dissecting our relationships with money and capitalism. And Imelda Marcos is a fascinating example of this, of someone who lives in a hyper wealthy way, and her family is accused of stealing the funds from the Philippines government, and she sort of portrays the way that this has been done over time and reactions to this over time, but sort of interviews with her as well, and how she has sort of intellectually shielded herself from all of the damage that her family has done in the country. Then there's the documentary RBG about the career and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's such a brilliant, inspirational woman and the Supreme Court justice. And I think we need more films that are inspirational and inspiring like this. I mean, I felt this way about reading Michelle Obama's autobiography, Becoming, last year. I just found it so inspiring and really uplifting in some very dark political times. Then there's the documentary Hale County This Morning, This Evening, which was nominated for an Oscar earlier this year, and it portrays the life of a small community in Alabama. It's a very artfully shot documentary, but it's done in such a moving and impactful way. I found it incredible and so beautiful. And there's a film which hasn't been released yet called Saint Maud, but I saw it at the London Film Festival this year. They screen a lot of films which haven't been released yet, and I was so glad I saw this. So it's a directorial debut by Rose Glass. And it's sort of part horror movie, part psychological suspense, part about religious fervor. So it follows a young woman who's a healthcare, taking care of an older dancer who has a lot of health problems. And the way it portrays their spiky relationship is so good. But it takes increasingly twisted turns, and it is so tense and creepy. And you can see a lot of influences from classic movies and a lot of different horror movies, but I think it's really its own thing. And then finally, I want to mention a couple of older movies, which I only saw for the very first time this year at the BFI South Bank in London. They screen a lot of old films and do some different seasons, and so they had one season about classic Mexican films. And there's this film called Aventurera, which is a film from 1950, and it's a Mexican drama from a genre known as rumberas films, which I hadn't heard about before this film season. But it follows the life of a woman named Elena, played by Nina Sevilla, who's a sort of cabaret artist and singer, and she does. There's just some wild, crazy numbers in it. It's some of those moments where you're just like, I can't believe I'm watching this on screen, because they're so sort of saucy and silly, and it's comic as well as moving, but it's all like very melodramatic and very emotional, and I just found it hilarious and completely jaw-dropping, a lot of these scenes. And then there's more recently there's been a musicals season at the BFI South Bank, and I saw Hello Dolly for the very first time. This film from 1969, which I feel like I should have seen before, but I just sort of figured it wasn't all that good because it was a huge box office bomb, and it's a film that's accused of killing the Hollywood musical because a lot of studios were nervous about making musicals after this because they lost so much money on this film. But it's just a completely wacky film. It really surprised me, and I thought it was a complete delight. I mean, Barbara Streisand is just sort of completely ridiculous in it, and but very funny and really endearing. And of course, I wish I could have seen the stage play of this with Carol Channing, because I love Carol Channing, and really she should have played this role and was more suited to it, because the role of Dolly is supposed to be played by an older woman, and Barbara was far too young to be in this film. But of course, she was just amazing to watch, and her scene with Louis Armstrong is just divine. It's so good. And also it features a song in it that is in the movie WALL-E, the Pixar movie, and it made me want to go back and watch that film WALL-E, because it uses that song in such a poignant way. So yeah, that was just wonderful to see. So those are some of my favorite films that I've seen this year. But like I said, let me know some of your favorites that you've watched, because yeah, hopefully I can watch some of them over the Christmas season. So thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye, everyone.